No one in Oakridge could have guessed that on a cold, rain-soaked morning, the quiet town would wake up to a crisis that would test the courage of a broken family and the instincts of a misunderstood dog. Dawn barely colored the clouds as Sarah Mitchell fumbled with her car keys, nerves raw from a sleepless night. She was still getting used to the emptiness of the house after the divorce, the way each room echoed differently, how the silences between her and her 5-year-old daughter Emma seemed longer here. Boxes still stacked in the hallway, unopened. Rain rattled the windows. Her phone, always buzzing with work emails, never let her forget the world outside these 4 walls. In the cramped kitchen, Emma sat quietly at the table, brown hair sticking to her cheeks, her small hand making slow circles in her bowl of soggy cereal. She wouldn't eat. She hadn't really spoken since they left Portland. Sarah's heart twisted, but she tried to keep her voice calm. "Honey, you have to eat something. Please." Emma just shrugged, eyes flicking to the big German shepherd pacing restlessly in the living room. The dog, Apollo, had come to them by chance, a rescue from the shelter. The shelter manager had warned Sarah, "He's nervous, he's big, and he's been through a lot. He needs a calm home." Sarah almost laughed. Calm was the last thing she could promise. Thunder rolled in the distance as Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another message from her boss, marked urgent. The shop was short-staffed, and she couldn't be late again. Not if she wanted to keep the only job she'd found since moving here. She glanced between her trembling daughter and the big, watchful dog. Apollo's tail was low, his eyes darting from Emma to the door, alert but anxious. The rules said never leave a child alone with a dangerous dog. But what choice did she have? Daycare was closed, the neighbors were strangers, and she was out of paid leave. Guilt warred with desperation as Sarah knelt beside Emma. "I'll only be gone for a little while, okay? Apollo will stay with you. He's your friend, remember?" Emma didn't answer, just slid off her chair and buried her face in Apollo's thick fur. The dog stiffened, then, sensing her fear, let out a quiet whine. For a second, it was just the sound of Emma's shaky breathing and Apollo's steady heartbeat. Sarah squeezed Emma's shoulder, trying to believe she was making the right call. She grabbed her umbrella, gave Apollo a last warning look, "Protect her," and hurried into the storm. The front door shut with a heavy thud. The clock on the wall ticked louder. Every step away from the house felt like a betrayal, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. But she told herself, just 20 minutes. What could happen in 20 minutes? Inside, Emma watched raindrops crawl down the window. Apollo settled beside her, his big body a warm barrier against the world. Emma reached out, her small fingers tangled in his fur. "It's okay. Mom will be back soon," she whispered, more to herself than the dog. Apollo licked her hand, his eyes fixed on the door. He didn't trust this new house, this new life, but he trusted Emma somehow. Meanwhile, at work, Sarah's anxiety grew with every ring of the phone, every time a customer raised their voice, every text that buzzed unanswered. When the store manager snapped at her to check the back room, she nearly broke down, but the guilt wouldn't let go. She replayed her decision over and over. Was Apollo really safe? What if the neighbors called animal control? What if, suddenly, her phone lit up? Unknown number. Her hands trembled as she answered, heart already pounding. On the other end, shouting, static, a woman's voice. "Sarah! You need to come home now! There's something wrong! Hurry!" Panic hit her chest like a hammer. Screams in the background, the sound of a child crying. Then the call cut out. Sarah dropped everything, sprinting past stunned co-workers, leaving her purse, her jacket, her dignity behind. She tore through the rain, nearly slipping on the slick sidewalk, the world blurring around her. The drive home was a nightmare. Every red light an eternity. Every second replaying her fears. Blood, bites, police, headlines about dangerous breeds. Please, God, let Emma be okay. As she turned onto her street, she saw the flashing lights first, red and blue slicing through the mist. Neighbors clustered in front yards, voices urgent and frantic. Sarah's world narrowed to the sight of her house. The crowd gathered on the porch. The sharp yelp of a dog. She slammed the car door and ran, heart in her throat. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the hands that tried to stop her, her breath coming in ragged gasps. There on the porch, she saw Apollo, blood on his leg, fur bristled, standing over Emma, who was curled on the ground, sobbing. The worst-case scenario seemed real for one terrifying second. Her daughter, her dog, chaos. But in that frozen moment, as the rain poured harder, Sarah caught sight of something else. A dead rattlesnake sprawled on the doormat, its body twisted, its head crushed. The neighbors' voices grew louder, some shouting at Apollo, others calling for help. Emma clung to the dog, screaming, "He saved me! He saved me!" Sarah's knees buckled as relief and terror crashed together. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she reached for Emma and Apollo, both shaking, both heroes, both victims of a world too quick to judge. And as Apollo wobbled and collapsed at her feet, Sarah realized nothing would ever be the same. Sarah's heart pounded as she dropped to her knees beside Emma and Apollo, barely noticing the sting of gravel through her jeans or the icy rain soaking her hair. For a split second, all she could see was blood, bright red, shocking against Apollo's thick black and tan fur. Emma's overalls were muddy and torn at the knee. Apollo's chest heaved, his breath coming fast, ears laid flat, teeth bared not in aggression, but pain. "Don't touch him! He's dangerous!" someone shouted from the crowd, but Sarah barely heard them. The only thing that mattered was Emma's voice, hoarse and desperate. "Mommy, Apollo saved me. He saved me from the snake." She was sobbing so hard her words broke apart, her little fists clutching Apollo's collar, refusing to let go even as Sarah reached for her. Sarah pulled Emma into her arms, feeling her daughter's body tremble against her chest. Apollo let out a low whine, shifting his weight to keep himself between Emma and the dead rattlesnake, as if even now he was still protecting her. For a moment, the scene blurred, the blue and red flash of police cruisers, the neighbors clustered in huddles of raincoats and umbrellas, their faces twisted in fear or awe. Officer Mason, the town's new patrolman, pushed through the crowd. He knelt next to Sarah, eyes scanning Emma for injuries. "Is she bit?" he demanded, his voice tight with concern. Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. Her mind was spinning. Apollo, blood, snake, Emma, chaos. Mason's radio crackled, dispatch asking for an update. "We've got a dead rattler," he reported. "One minor appears unharmed, but the dog's in bad shape. We need animal control and a vet, ASAP." He shot Sarah a look, both reassuring and urgent. "Ma'am, we need to get the dog out of here. He's hurt bad." Only then did Sarah see the puncture wounds on Apollo's front leg, the swelling already starting. The snake's head was a mess. Apollo had clearly fought for his life, and Emma's. Sarah's guilt, already sharp, twisted deeper. This dog, the one everyone called dangerous, had risked everything for her child. The crowd shifted, whispers swelling into heated debates. "That dog should be put down," yelled an older woman with tight lips and a rain bonnet. "It could have killed the girl." Others argued back. "Didn't you see? He protected her. He's a hero." The chaos only added to Sarah's panic, but she blocked it out, focusing on Apollo's labored breathing, the blood dripping from his paw. Emma, still in Sarah's arms, was nearly hysterical. "Don't let them take him away, Mom! Please, he saved me! He's my friend!" Her voice broke, and Sarah hugged her tighter. "I promise, sweetheart. I won't let anything happen to him. I promise." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was a promise she could keep. Animal control arrived, led by Miss Powers, a severe woman with graying hair and a clipboard. She approached cautiously, eyeing Apollo with suspicion. "We'll need to assess the animal," she said briskly, "and you'll need to file a statement. There'll be a hearing. He's a rescue, correct?" Sarah nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "He's not aggressive. He saved my daughter from the snake. Please. He needs a vet, now." Mason backed her up, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "He saved the kid, Powers. Give the dog a chance." Miss Powers hesitated, then radioed for a local veterinarian. As sirens wailed in the distance, the community's mood began to shift. Some neighbors who'd been shouting now moved closer, murmuring sympathy. Mrs. Klein, who'd never said a word to Sarah before, pressed a blanket into her hands. "For the dog," she said softly. "You did the right thing bringing him here." Minutes felt like hours until Dr. Patel, Oakridge's only vet, arrived, skidding to a stop in his old Subaru. He knelt by Apollo, quick and sure, his hands gentle despite the urgency. "We need to get him to the clinic fast. Rattlesnake venom is no joke." He looked at Sarah, then at Emma, then at Apollo, his expression softening. "He's got a fighting chance, but it'll be close." Apollo, shivering and weak, let the vet and officer lift him onto a makeshift stretcher, never taking his eyes off Emma. Even in pain, he was her shadow, her shield. As Dr. Patel's team loaded Apollo into the back of the SUV, Emma broke free from Sarah's arms, racing after them. "Wait! He's scared! I want to go too!" Mason stepped in, offering a rare smile. "Let her ride with us. I'll take Mom. You follow Dr. Patel, okay?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face as she scooped Emma up and hurried into the patrol car. As they sped to the animal hospital, Sarah's phone buzzed with messages. Her boss, missed calls, texts from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them all, her focus on the rain-blurred world outside and the terrified little girl clinging to her in the back seat. Behind them, the crowd began to disperse, but the whispers continued. Word was already spreading through Oakridge. The new woman's dog had attacked, or saved, her daughter. At the clinic, the action moved at a blur. Apollo was whisked away on a gurney, Dr. Patel shouting instructions, nurses moving with tense urgency. Sarah and Emma were led to a small, overheated waiting room, where the silence pressed in thick and heavy. Emma curled into her mother's lap, repeating the same words over and over. "Apollo saved me. He's not bad, Mom. He's my hero. Don't let them hurt him." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, voice cracking as she promised again and again, "I'll do everything I can." Outside, the rain finally slowed, leaving Oakridge washed and raw, forever changed by a dog's act of impossible loyalty. The clock on the animal hospital wall seemed frozen, the second hand ticking so slowly it was as if time itself wanted to drag out Sarah's agony. The rain outside had slowed to a persistent drizzle, but inside the clinic, the air was thick with anxiety and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Sarah sat hunched on the hard vinyl bench, arms wrapped tight around Emma, who clutched Apollo's blanket like it was a lifeline. The world had narrowed to this tiny, brightly lit room, the hush broken only by the distant bark of a dog or the crackle of an intercom. Dr. Patel had rushed Apollo straight into the back as soon as they arrived. Sarah had caught a glimpse of Apollo's glazed eyes, the ragged sound of his breathing, the foam at the corner of his mouth, a sight she would never forget. The door swung shut behind the vet, leaving Sarah and Emma adrift, untethered from everything but each other. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Each time footsteps echoed in the hall, Sarah's heart leapt, only to sink again when it was just a nurse or another pet owner. Emma didn't speak. She simply sat cross-legged on the floor, Apollo's collar clutched in her hands, lips moving as she whispered stories to the dog that wasn't there. Sarah recognized some of the stories, ones she used to tell Emma at bedtime, before the divorce, before Oakridge, before the move that changed everything. Her daughter's voice was so soft it barely rose above a breath, but the hope in it was almost too much to bear. Sarah stared at her shaking hands. Every moment replayed in her mind. The hurried goodbye, the sound of the front door shutting, the sick dread as she left her daughter in the care of a rescue dog she barely knew. Was she selfish, desperate, or just a mother out of options? The guilt gnawed at her. If Apollo dies, it's my fault. If Emma had been bitten, she couldn't even finish the thought. The door opened. Dr. Patel stepped in, dark eyes tired but steady. He looked at Sarah, then Emma, then down at the clipboard in his hands. He's stable for now. We flushed the venom, started him on anti-venom and fluids. But the bite was bad, and he's a big dog, so it's taking longer to circulate. We're watching for signs of kidney failure. He lowered his voice gentle but grim. He's fighting hard. I wish I could promise more, but right now, it could go either way. Sarah felt the room tilt. She tried to form words, but her throat closed up. Emma looked up at Dr. Patel, eyes wide and pleading. Can I see him, please? The vet hesitated, then nodded. A quick visit. He needs all the love he can get. In the ICU, Apollo lay on a steel table covered in blankets. Tubes snaked from his leg. A monitor beeped softly beside him. He looked so much smaller, so much older and more fragile than he had at home. Emma climbed onto the chair beside him, her small fingers stroking his paw, and began to sing. A lullaby Sarah used to sing for her when she was little. The sound was shaky, halting, but it filled the sterile room with warmth. Sarah watched, tears streaking her cheeks. It struck her then how much Emma had changed since the divorce. Her daughter, once so bubbly and loud, had retreated into herself, words trickling out only in whispers or songs for Apollo. And here she was, opening up to the only friend she had in this new world, begging him to stay. As Emma sang, Apollo's eyes fluttered. He tried to lift his head, but couldn't manage it, instead thumping his tail once weakly on the blanket. Sarah reached out, hand trembling as she brushed his fur. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should never have left you both alone. Please fight, Apollo. Please. They stayed there for hours. Nurses brought Sarah coffee she barely tasted. Emma fell asleep with her head on Apollo's side, never letting go of his paw. At some point, Michael, Sarah's ex-husband, called, his voice angry and scared in equal measure. How could you let this happen? He demanded, his words laced with accusation and hurt. Sarah tried to explain, but the words tangled together, her exhaustion raw. I did what I thought was right. I had no choice. Please. Emma needs you here. By midnight, the waiting room had emptied. Outside, the last patrol car drove by, its headlights sweeping across the rain-soaked windows. Inside, the hospital felt like the only place left in the world. Emma woke and began to hum softly, eyes never leaving Apollo's face. Sarah watched her daughter, the pain in her chest sharp and unrelenting. She saw for the first time how much she'd been leaning on Apollo too. Not just for Emma's sake, but for her own. Dr. Patel returned, his news grim. "We're doing everything we can. The venom is hard on his kidneys. We'll know more by morning." He left, and Sarah felt hope slip from her fingers, replaced by a dull ache. But that night, something shifted. As Sarah held Emma close, they both cried, not just for Apollo, but for everything they'd lost. And maybe for the first time, everything they still had. It wasn't the kind of crying that broke you. It was the kind that put pieces back together, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. Sarah looked at Apollo, fighting for life despite all the odds stacked against him. She realized she wasn't just fighting for a dog. She was fighting for her family, for forgiveness, for the chance to start over. And as the storm finally broke outside, washing the world clean, Sarah vowed she would do whatever it took to bring Apollo home. The first pale blue of morning crept through the hospital windows, revealing a room that looked as exhausted as the people in it. Sarah hadn't slept. She was slumped in a battered chair, her jacket draped over Emma, who dozed with Apollo's blanket clutched in her arms. Coffee gone cold on the table. Through the glass, the ICU monitor blinked steadily, Apollo's breathing a low, rhythmic sound that anchored Sarah's heart, even as worry gnawed at her from the inside. As dawn brightened, the tension in the waiting room became a strange, silent companion. Sarah heard every footstep, every cough, every groan from the emergency kennels behind the swinging doors. It was a relief when she saw Emma's face, eyes heavy but finally free from the nightmares that had haunted her for weeks. For the first time since their lives were upended, Sarah saw something close to peace in her daughter's sleeping features. Then the quiet broke. A sharp knock on the glass, and the door creaked open. Michael stepped inside, clutching his phone and wearing the same blue jeans and windbreaker from the custody exchange days. His hair was rumpled, face shadowed by stubble, eyes wild with anger and worry. "You didn't answer your phone," he barked, voice rough as gravel. "I drove all night. What the hell happened, Sarah?" Sarah winced, rising to meet him, bracing herself for the argument she'd tried so hard to avoid. "Emma's okay," she started, voice trembling. But it was close. "The dog, Apollo, he saved her. There was a rattlesnake in the house. He killed it, but he got bit. He's fighting for his life right now." Michael's face twisted, grief and fear warring with resentment. "I told you that dog was trouble. You don't leave a kid alone with a rescue, Sarah. What were you thinking?" He paced, fists balled tight. Emma stirred, woke up and sat up, blinking at her parents with red-rimmed eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just slid from the chair and walked over, squeezing between her parents, taking both their hands in hers. For a heartbeat, the three of them stood in a fragile, silent circle, Sarah and Michael glancing at each other over Emma's head, pain and regret filling the gaps where words used to be. There was no room for anger, only the raw reality that they could have lost everything in a heartbeat. The hospital doors swung again, and a man shuffled in, older, his face lined, beard peppered with gray. Dr. Reynolds, their next-door neighbor, someone Sarah barely knew. He looked out of place holding a thermos of coffee and a paper bag of muffins. He hesitated by the chairs, then settled in beside Sarah with a sigh. "I heard what happened," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges. "Guess the whole town has by now. Folks are talking. Lots of folks saying that dog's a menace, but some are saying he's a hero." He let out a shaky breath. "I was one of the loudest about a dangerous breeds. Always thought they were ticking time bombs. Lost my boy to a dog when I was a young man. Spent my life warning people, maybe more out of grief than wisdom. His eyes glistened with memories. Never told anyone that before. I'm sorry, Sarah. Sorry for what you're going through. Sarah reached out, put her hand on his arm, and the simple human contact broke through the dam inside her. I never thought I'd be here, she admitted, but I can't lose Apollo. He's more than a dog. He's family. I thought I was saving him, but now he's the one saving us. Emma tugged Michael's hand, staring at him with a determination that surprised both parents. Dad, Apollo's not bad. He's my friend. He saved me. Michael looked away, jaw clenched, but he didn't let go. As the sun lifted, the small waiting room filled with the quiet community of a family in crisis, and unexpected allies. Nurses brought blankets and gentle smiles. Even a couple of neighbors stopped by, dropping off cards and asking about Emma, some apologizing for their harsh words the night before. Mid-morning, Dr. Patel emerged, his eyes tired but not hopeless. He made it through the night, he said. The venom hit his kidneys hard, but he's still fighting. There's a chance, but it'll be a long recovery. The relief that swept through the room was immediate and overwhelming. Emma pressed her face to Sarah's stomach, sobbing quietly, while Michael let out a shaky breath he'd been holding for hours. Just as the hope began to settle, another visitor entered, James Reed, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a faded service jacket. He was introduced by Dr. Patel as the brother of Apollo's former owner. In his hands were a stack of papers, old photos, and a weathered collar with a glinting service badge. I thought you'd want to know, James said, voice thick with emotion. Apollo wasn't just a shelter dog. He was a certified service dog for my brother, a combat vet. Saved my brother's life more than once. When my brother passed, Apollo ended up at the shelter. He's been misunderstood ever since. He handed Sarah the papers, medical records, service dog certification, notes from therapists and trainers, all proof that Apollo was a hero long before Oakridge ever met him. Michael, stunned, took the papers and flipped through them. So he's been a hero before? He murmured, the old anger softening in his eyes. James nodded. He's just been waiting for another family to protect. The room went quiet, the gravity of the moment settling over everyone. For the first time since the chaos began, hope took root. Not just for Apollo, but for all of them. And as Sarah looked at her daughter, her ex-husband, the neighbor who'd confessed his grief, and the man who'd brought a piece of Apollo's past, she realized that sometimes healing started with simply sharing your story and letting others share theirs. As morning blossomed into day, the family huddled together, still fractured, but together, waiting for the next chapter in Apollo's fight for life, bound now by something deeper than fear or regret, a shared belief that every second chance was worth fighting for. By the end of the week, the story of Apollo, the rescue dog who saved a child from a rattlesnake, had become the only thing anyone in Oakridge could talk about. Some people called him a hero. Others insisted he was still a threat. Rumors flew faster than facts. Was the dog dangerous or just misunderstood? Was Sarah a negligent mother or the victim of terrible luck? No one seemed able to agree, and that uncertainty was a powder keg waiting for a spark. It came in the form of a hastily called town meeting at the old Oakridge Community Hall. Councilwoman Harris, a stern woman with a clipped voice and a reputation for getting things done, wasted no time. We need to address the issue of dangerous dogs in our community, she declared to the packed crowd, her eyes scanning the room for support. One incident is too many. It's time to consider breed-specific regulations and whether this dog, Apollo, belongs here at all. The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Sarah, still pale from sleepless nights at the animal hospital, sat sandwiched between Michael and Emma. Emma's small hand found Sarah's and squeezed so hard her fingers went numb. Michael shifted beside her, his face a mask of worry and reluctant anger. They weren't alone. Dr. Reynolds was there, sitting ramrod straight in the front row, and so was James Reed, clutching Apollo's service dog records. Councilwoman Harris continued, her tone sharpening. I know some people say this dog is a hero, but I remind you, he's a rescue, a so-called dangerous breed, with a history we cannot fully know. It could have ended much worse. We have a duty to keep our children safe. Murmurs of agreement rippled through one side of the room. From the other, a voice called out. Mrs. Klein, the same neighbor who'd brought Apollo a blanket that stormy night. With all due respect, Councilwoman, it could have ended much worse if Apollo hadn't been there. That snake could have killed Emma. Are we going to punish a dog for doing what none of us could? A heated debate erupted. Some neighbors argued that Apollo's actions proved his worth, that he'd earned a place in the community. Others, especially those who'd never owned a dog or who'd had bad experiences in the past, warned that one heroic deed didn't erase the risk. Social media was ablaze. Posts, comments, hashtags, #SaveApollo, #DangerousBreed debate, #Oakridge divided. Sarah felt herself shrinking in her chair, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear. She had never wanted to be the center of anything. Now everyone seemed to have an opinion about her family, about the dog who had risked his life for her daughter. She stared at her hands in her lap, trying to breathe, trying not to cry. But then Emma, trembling but determined, stood up on her chair. The entire room fell silent. Her voice was small but steady. Apollo is my best friend. He saved me. I was scared of him at first, but he just wanted to help. I love him. Please don't make him leave. For a moment, the whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Even Councilwoman Harris hesitated, her mouth opening and closing, unsure how to respond. Michael, who until now had said nothing, cleared his throat and rose to stand beside his daughter. I didn't trust Apollo either, he admitted, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. When Sarah brought him home, I was angry. But that dog saved my child. He put himself in harm's way for Emma. Maybe he's not what we expected, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes the thing we're most afraid of is the very thing that saves us. Dr. Reynolds, moved by Emma's courage, stood up as well. If anyone here remembers, I was against dangerous breeds in this town. I've spoken against them at these very meetings, but I was wrong. I let my own grief blind me. This family didn't just rescue a dog. They showed this town what second chances mean. His words changed the atmosphere in the room. People began to whisper, reconsidering old fears and prejudices. Even those who'd spoken against Apollo earlier seemed unsure now. The argument was no longer just about a dog, but about fear versus hope, about old wounds and new beginnings. Councilwoman Harris tried to regain control, calling for order. This is an emotional issue, but we must look at the facts. The law requires a review of Apollo's case. Animal control will make a recommendation. Until then, the dog stays in quarantine at the hospital. The council will reconvene once we've heard all sides. But the town was no longer just an audience. Supporters began organizing online, petitions, fundraisers, hashtags trending beyond Oakridge. Dr. Patel posted updates on Apollo's health. James Reed shared photos of Apollo's service days, showing him helping veterans and comforting kids. Donations poured in to cover his medical bills. Someone even started a GoFundMe. Help save Apollo, Oakridge's hero dog. Outside the hall, news crews gathered, drawn by the drama and the image of a little girl fighting for her dog. Emma, usually so shy, agreed to speak for the cameras, clutching Apollo's blanket and telling anyone who'd listen, "He's not scary, he's brave." For every supporter, there was still a critic. Some warned that if Apollo was allowed to stay, other dangerous dogs would follow. Threatening letters arrived at Sarah's house, along with offers of help and homemade cookies. Michael, surprised by his own protectiveness, stood guard at their door at night. But hope was growing stronger than fear. Emma started a handmade sign in their yard. "Thank you, Apollo." Neighbors added flowers, notes, drawings of dogs and hearts. For the first time, Sarah saw the power of a community in turmoil, choosing to fight for something good. Through it all, Apollo remained at the animal hospital, fighting his own battle to survive. Each day, Sarah and Emma visited, reading him stories, holding his paw, and waiting, hoping the town, like Apollo, would choose courage over judgment. That night, the animal hospital felt like a world apart from the noisy debates of Oakridge. Inside, everything narrowed to a hush. Just the rhythmic beep of the ICU monitors, the soft click of nurses' shoes on tile, and the low, steady hum of machines working tirelessly to keep Apollo alive. Sarah sat with Emma in the small visitors' room, their eyes burning with exhaustion, hope, and fear. They had barely left Apollo's side for days. Each visit felt both like a reunion and a possible goodbye. Emma sprawled on the blanket she insisted on bringing from home, the one Apollo used to curl up on at her feet. She pressed her cheek into the faded fabric, whispering promises to her friend. "You're so brave. Please come home. I'll share my teddy bear with you. I promise I'll never be scared of you again." Her words trailed off into sleepy murmurs, and she finally dozed. Her fingers curled around the dog's collar like a talisman. Sarah couldn't sleep. She stared out the window into the empty parking lot, the orange glow of streetlights blurring through her tears. Her mind spun with worries. The upcoming council meeting, the way some neighbors still glared at her in the grocery store, the stack of hospital bills piling up on her kitchen counter. But every time her panic threatened to break loose, she looked at Emma and at Apollo's still form in the ICU, and remembered why she had to keep fighting. Dr. Patel came in, his tired eyes soft with understanding. He checked on Apollo, murmuring gentle encouragement as he adjusted the IV drip. "He's holding on," he told Sarah, "but we're seeing signs of a rare reaction to the anti-venom. His immune system is struggling. It's not common, but I've seen it before in working dogs, especially those with a strong drive to push through pain. The next few hours are critical." Sarah felt her knees buckle with relief and dread all at once. "Is there anything else we can do?" Her voice was raw from days of crying and lack of sleep. Dr. Patel hesitated, then nodded. "James Reed's been calling around, looking for specialists. There's an experimental anti-venom that might help, but it's risky. We'd be trying something new, no guarantees. It's your decision, Sarah." Michael, who had quietly entered behind them, finally spoke up. "We have to try. He's not just a dog. He saved our daughter. We owe him everything." His voice cracked in a way Sarah hadn't heard since the early days of their marriage, before so much had broken between them. They signed the forms, hands trembling, hope mixed with terror. Dr. Patel moved quickly, coordinating with the nearby university's vet school to get the antivenom couriered in. Emma woke, startled by the bustle, and Sarah explained in the gentlest way she could. "They're going to try something special to help Apollo get better. He needs you to keep believing in him, okay?" Emma nodded fiercely, wiping her nose on her sleeve. She knelt by the glass window to the ICU, pressing her palm to the barrier, eyes locked on Apollo's motionless form. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "You promised." As the night deepened, the hospital grew quieter. Michael and Sarah sat together for the first time in years, sharing the same bench, hands brushing. Michael reached over, tentative, and took Sarah's hand. She squeezed back, drawing strength from the simple contact. "No matter what happens, we're going to get through this," he murmured, and for a moment Sarah believed him. Hours crawled by. The antivenom arrived, a small vial carried in by a vet tech who looked almost reverent as he handed it to Dr. Patel. The team moved quickly, prepping Apollo, explaining every step. "We're going to give it slowly," Dr. Patel said, watching for any signs of reaction. "Emma, you can stay right here and talk to him. I think your voice helps more than you know." Emma began to sing softly, her favorite lullaby, the one Apollo had heard so many times before. Her voice was rough with emotion, but grew steadier with each note. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself listen, memories of better days washing over her. The first day they brought Apollo home, the way Emma's laughter had echoed through their tiny new house, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they could start over in Oakridge. Suddenly, an alarm shrieked. Apollo's vitals spiked. Nurses rushed in, Dr. Patel barking orders. Sarah's heart stopped as she watched through the glass. For a split second, it seemed like everything they feared would come true. But then, slowly, the numbers settled. Apollo's breathing eased. His tail twitched. Emma's song didn't falter. Instead, she pressed her forehead to the glass and whispered, "Don't give up. We're right here." After what felt like forever, Dr. Patel came out, wiping sweat from his brow. "He's responding. It's working. He's not out of the woods, but he's fighting." Relief flooded the room. Emma burst into tears, and Sarah wrapped her in a fierce hug. Even Michael, never one for displays of emotion, wiped his eyes on his sleeve. As the sky outside began to lighten, the little family stayed together in the waiting room, sharing stories about Apollo, his goofiness, his gentle way with Emma, the way he seemed to know what each of them needed, even before they did. Dr. Reynolds stopped by, bringing hot chocolate and words of encouragement. Neighbors dropped off cards and stuffed animals for Emma to give to Apollo when he woke up. For the first time in days, Sarah allowed herself a sliver of hope. She squeezed Michael's hand and looked at Emma, then at the dog who had brought them all back together. No matter what happened next, they were a family. And families, she realized, could weather any storm, so long as they held on to each other. Morning broke over Oakridge with gray skies and anxious energy. The whole town seemed to pulse with tension as people filed into the courthouse, the air charged with anticipation and curiosity. Sarah felt like she was stepping into a different world as she walked through the heavy double doors, Michael at her side, and Emma squeezed between them, her small hand tightly gripping Sarah's fingers. News cameras blinked in the hallway, and strangers whispered as they passed. It was a scene Sarah never imagined for her family, but there was no escaping it now. Today was the hearing that would decide Apollo's fate. The courtroom itself was overflowing. Some faces Sarah recognized from the neighborhood, others she'd only seen online, or not at all. At the front sat Councilwoman Harris, stern as ever, beside two lawyers and an officer from Animal Control. Dr. Reynolds, James Reed, and Dr. Patel sat in the row behind Sarah, their quiet presence steadying her nerves. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Green, entered and called the hearing to order. her voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "Today," Judge Green began, "we are here to determine whether the dog known as Apollo poses a danger to the community, or whether his actions merit a different kind of recognition. I ask for civility and open minds." She looked directly at Sarah. "Let's begin with your testimony." Sarah's throat was dry as she stood, heart hammering. She told the story simply, how she'd trusted Apollo to watch Emma, how she'd feared the worst when she saw the blood, how she realized in the chaos that Apollo had protected her child, not hurt her. She described the terror, the heartbreak, and the impossible relief when Emma emerged unscathed, thanks only to the dog no one had trusted. As she spoke, Sarah saw a flicker of sympathy in the judge's eyes. Councilwoman Harris was quick to counter, her voice crisp as she read from a file. "The law is clear. We have ordinances about dangerous breeds and rescue animals with unknown histories. Apollo, by all accounts, was aggressive when animal control arrived. He needed to be restrained. He's already caused panic in the community, and his presence continues to divide Oakridge." But before she could continue, Dr. Patel rose, cleared his throat, and spoke with measured conviction. "I treated Apollo. I saw the injuries from the rattlesnake. I saw a dog who fought not out of aggression, but out of loyalty and courage. His behavior in the hospital was gentle, even as he suffered. He has never shown violence to any human, even under extreme pain." James Reed followed, presenting Apollo's service dog certification and a stack of letters from veterans and therapists. "My brother depended on Apollo after coming home from Afghanistan. That dog saved him from nightmares, from panic attacks. He is trained to protect, not attack. After my brother passed, Apollo lost everything. He ended up at the shelter through no fault of his own." Next, Dr. Reynolds asked for permission to address the court. "I used to speak against dogs like Apollo," he admitted, his voice breaking with old pain. "But I was wrong. My fear was my own to carry. Emma is alive today because of Apollo. Isn't it time Oakridge stopped judging by appearances and started judging by actions?" It was Emma's turn. Her feet barely touched the floor as she sat at the witness table, blanket clutched tight in her lap. The courtroom stilled. "Apollo is my best friend. I used to be afraid of him, but he was never mean. When the snake came, he saved me. He didn't let it hurt me. He's not a bad dog. Please let him come home." Even Councilwoman Harris seemed uncertain, glancing down at her notes and hesitating before calling the next witness. Animal Control's report was read aloud, describing Apollo's initial fear and confusion, but also his gentle behavior since. The officer, after a pause, concluded, "I've seen dangerous dogs. Apollo isn't one of them." The media outside had been busy. Photos of Emma and Apollo, news stories about the town divided, videos of Emma's trembling speech. Supporters rallied outside the courthouse with candles and handmade banners. "Let Apollo come home. Judge by deeds, not by breed, and heroes wear fur." Children drew pictures of Apollo and taped them to the courthouse doors. Oakridge, once fractured, was finding unity in their shared compassion. As the judge listened, the air in the room shifted. For the first time, Sarah felt hope swelling in her chest. Michael stood and added his voice. "I didn't want Apollo at first, but I was wrong. He gave our family a second chance, and he's part of what's helping us put our lives back together. I'd trust him with my child's life. I already have." Just as the arguments were winding down, a bailiff hurried into the room with a message for Judge Green. She read it, her expression unreadable, then addressed the courtroom. "I've just received an update from Dr. Patel. Apollo's condition has stabilized. He's expected to recover. A collective exhale swept the room. Outside, cheers erupted. Sarah's knees went weak with relief. Emma sobbed, clinging to her mother. Even Councilwoman Harris closed her folder, defeated but not unkind. Judge Green stood. I will adjourn court for the day to review all testimony. But I want the community to hear this. Sometimes we have to look past our fear and listen to what's right in front of us. Apollo is, above all, a hero. She rapped the gavel. Court adjourned. Outside, the town celebrated. Strangers hugged, neighbors smiled at each other, and the divisiveness of the past week seemed to melt away under the banner of a shared victory. For the first time since coming to Oakridge, Sarah felt not just hope, but belonging. And in the hospital, Apollo slept peacefully, his family and his community waiting to welcome him home. A week after the courtroom showdown, Oakridge felt changed. The air was brighter, the energy lighter, as if the town itself had exhaled a long-held breath. For days, people talked of little else: the girl, the dog, the snake, the courtroom. Stories spread. Some whispered, some shouted, about how a misunderstood animal had turned a fearful, fractured community into a place where hope and second chances were suddenly possible. The hospital called early on a Saturday morning. Dr. Patel's voice trembled with emotion as he delivered the news. He's strong enough to come home. Sarah hardly had time to put the phone down before Emma was already pulling on her sneakers and running circles in the kitchen, shouting, "We get to bring Apollo home! We get to bring Apollo home!" Michael, too, was beaming, softer and more open than Sarah had seen him in months. She realized, in that joyful chaos, that they hadn't felt like a true family since before the divorce. Apollo was the thread binding them together again. They arrived at the hospital to find not just the staff waiting, but half the town. Neighbors lined the sidewalk, children with handmade banners, reporters with microphones, and strangers clutching bouquets and bags of dog treats. Someone had tied balloons to the hospital sign, and there, right in the middle, stood Dr. Reynolds with James Reed, each wearing broad smiles. The glass doors slid open. Apollo stood inside, bandaged but proud, his tail wagging slowly, eyes bright and alert. He looked thinner, older somehow, but as soon as he saw Emma, he barked and lunged forward, leash and all, nearly toppling the vet techs. Emma ran to him, hugging his thick neck, crying tears of joy into his fur. Sarah knelt beside them, overwhelmed by gratitude. Dr. Patel addressed the crowd, his voice carrying over the noise. This isn't just about a dog. It's about what we can become when we set aside fear. Oakridge is better because of Apollo, and because of all of you who chose to give him, and each other, a chance. As Apollo stepped outside, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Kids on bikes followed alongside as the family made their way down Main Street. The police, led by Officer Mason, offered a gentle escort, grinning at Emma as she waved to her classmates. Mrs. Klein handed Sarah a casserole. "For when things quiet down, dear." Michael laughed for the first time in ages, throwing his arm around Sarah's shoulders, pulling her close. When they reached the park, the whole town gathered to celebrate. There were tables piled with food, a bouncy castle for the kids, even a local band playing cheerful tunes. Councilwoman Harris, now more humble, approached Sarah and extended her hand. "You were brave, and so was your family. Thank you for showing us what real courage looks like." She turned to address the crowd. "As of this morning, the Oakridge City Council has voted to amend its dangerous dog ordinance. No more bans based on breed. We will judge by behavior and by actions, starting today. Apollo, you are Oakridge's hero." Emma beamed. Dr. Reynolds, inspired by Apollo's journey, announced a new therapy dog program in Apollo's honor. We'll be training shelter dogs to visit hospitals, nursing homes, and schools. If even one person finds healing like Emma did, it's worth it. That afternoon, Apollo basked in the affection of everyone. Children petting him, adults shaking Sarah and Michael's hands, neighbors offering apologies and congratulations in equal measure. The local news interviewed Emma, who explained, "I was scared of him at first, but he showed me how to be brave. Now he helps me not be afraid anymore." Michael added, "He didn't just save Emma, he helped save our family." After the festivities, Sarah, Michael, Emma, and Apollo walked home together, the sun warm on their backs. Emma ran ahead, Apollo bounding after her, his limp barely noticeable. For the first time, Sarah felt the burden of the past few months lift. The house, once cold and foreign, felt alive with laughter and love. News of Apollo's heroism and Oakridge's transformation spread beyond their small town. The story was picked up by regional news outlets, then national ones. Emails poured in from people inspired to adopt dogs, to volunteer at shelters, to rethink their own fears and judgments. Dr. Reynolds' therapy dog program received donations from as far away as Seattle and San Francisco. A month later, Apollo began visiting local schools and the Oakridge Hospital, his gentle presence calming anxious children and lonely elders alike. Emma, now confident and lively, would sometimes come along, telling everyone who would listen, "This is Apollo. He saved my life." The town that once debated his right to exist now celebrated him at every opportunity. Sarah watched her daughter blossom. Nightmares gone, laughter returned. Michael, too, was different, more patient and present, quick to apologize and slow to anger. They found themselves co-parenting with a kindness neither had thought possible. Every night, Apollo curled up at Emma's feet, his breathing steady, his eyes always watchful. The change wasn't just in their house. Neighbors who used to cross the street now waved hello. Children played together in the park, some even joining Emma and Apollo for walks. The town was no longer divided by fear, but united by a shared story of hope and redemption. On weekends, Emma and Sarah volunteered at the animal shelter, helping other families find their own Apollo. They told everyone, sometimes heroes have fur, sometimes all they need is a second chance. As summer deepened, Oakridge became not just a town with a hero dog, but a place where people believed again, in courage, in second chances, in the healing power of love. Long after the headlines faded and the banners from Apollo's celebration were packed away, the ripples of his story continued to shape Oakridge and the people who called it home. In the quiet that followed the drama, Sarah found herself reflecting more deeply on all that had changed. Not just around her, but within her. For the first time in months, mornings in their house began with laughter instead of silence. Emma, once haunted by nightmares and anxiety, would wake up early, tiptoe past Sarah's room, and curl up beside Apollo on his blanket. Sometimes Sarah would hear her daughter giggling as Apollo woofed softly in response to her whispered secrets. It was the sound of healing, a language of trust rebuilt day by day in the simplest ways. But it wasn't just Emma who had changed. Michael, too, became a different father. The crisis had shaken him out of his anger and regret, softening the edges of a man who'd once hidden behind work and blame. Now he and Sarah navigated co-parenting not as adversaries, but as partners. There were still disagreements, of course, but they listened to each other in a way they never had before. The family, battered but resilient, found a new rhythm. Sarah often sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip behind the pine trees, Apollo lying at her feet. She'd replay everything that had happened, from the moment she decided to trust Apollo with Emma, to the terrible drive home, to the sight of her daughter in her hero's arms. The guilt that once gnawed at her now felt tempered by a hard-won wisdom. "I thought I was saving Apollo," she admitted to Michael one night, "but I think he saved us. He made me face my fear, of being alone, of making mistakes, of trusting again." Michael nodded, his eyes distant but gentle. "He made me realize how easy it is to judge, how much harder it is to forgive." He looked at Emma, playing with Apollo in the grass. "Maybe none of us are who we used to be. Maybe that's a good thing." Dr. Reynolds became a fixture in their lives, stopping by with treats for Apollo or a new book for Emma. He helped launch the Apollo K-9 safety program, training rescue dogs for service work. His own journey from outspoken critic to advocate for misunderstood animals became its own story in Oakridge, a reminder that it was never too late to change. The town, too, absorbed the lessons from Apollo's ordeal. People began to look at each other differently, more open, less suspicious. The old divisions over breed bans and rescue animals softened. The city council formed a committee, including Sarah and Dr. Reynolds, to ensure animal ordinances were based on behavior, not fear. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid Apollo now stopped to scratch his ears or offer him a treat. The community, once torn by suspicion, began to pride itself on compassion and inclusion. Emma flourished. She became known as the dog whisperer at school, helping other kids overcome their fears of animals, of being new, of being different. Her teacher told Sarah, "She's found her voice. She's teaching us all what empathy looks like." Emma's nightmares, once a nightly torment, faded into memory. In their place grew a steady confidence and a tender bravery. Apollo, always at her side, seemed to understand. He watched over her as fiercely as ever, but now his eyes were softer, his tail quick to wag. The family's healing spilled outward. Inspired by Emma and Apollo, other families stepped forward to adopt shelter dogs, some even opening their homes to animals once labeled unadoptable. The local shelter, once always full, began to empty as the therapy dog program took off. Oakridge became a model for nearby towns, a community where animals and people alike were given second chances. But perhaps the deepest transformation was the one that couldn't be seen, only felt. Sarah saw it in herself every time she hesitated to judge a neighbor, every time she chose curiosity over fear. She saw it in Michael, who volunteered at the therapy dog program, and in Dr. Reynolds, who spoke publicly about overcoming prejudice and grief. Late one evening, after a long day volunteering at the shelter, Sarah sat with Emma and Apollo in the backyard. The air was warm, the grass still damp from a light rain. Emma leaned against Apollo, stroking his ears. "Mom, do you think Apollo knows he's a hero?" she asked. Sarah smiled, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "I think he knows he's loved, and I think that's even better." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the dark, not of being new, not even of snakes. I think Apollo taught me how to be brave." Sarah felt a swell of pride. "He taught me too, and you, and Dad, and maybe the whole town." She looked at Apollo, who rested his head on Emma's lap, eyes closed, content, and at peace. "He showed us that sometimes the ones we're most afraid of are the ones who save us, that we all deserve a second chance." As dusk settled over Oakridge, Sarah knew that saving Apollo had done more than give a dog a home. It had saved a family, mended old wounds, and brought a community together in unexpected ways. The lessons would echo for years, that healing required trust, that courage was contagious, and that empathy, given freely, could transform lives. Late summer sunlight poured over Oakridge Park, gilding the grass and casting long, warm shadows beneath the big maples. The town had gathered for its annual Day of Community, but this year it felt different. Kids raced past on bicycles, trailing laughter. Tables overflowed with food and flowers. At the center of it all was Emma, hair wild in the breeze, running with Apollo as he bounded ahead, tongue lolling, eyes bright with joy. It was hard to believe that just months earlier, fear and suspicion had nearly torn this place apart. Sarah sat with Michael on a picnic blanket, watching Emma and Apollo play. Around them, familiar faces mingled with new ones. Families that had moved to Oakridge, others who'd lived there for decades. Some who had once been on opposite sides of the great dog debate. Dr. Reynolds manned a booth for the Apollo K-9 safety program, chatting with kids about how to approach dogs safely and sharing stories of second chances. Nearby, Councilwoman Harris greeted newcomers, her own rescue dog snoozing at her feet, a small but unmistakable sign of how much things had changed. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah wandered over to a quieter corner of the park. There she found a young boy, perhaps 8, standing nervously beside his mother. The boy held a leash loosely in his hands, at the end of which was a nervous, skinny mutt with big brown eyes. Apollo, curious as always, ambled over and sniffed the newcomer. The boy flinched at first, then watched as Emma knelt and gently stroked the dog's ears. "Is your dog scared too?" Emma asked, voice kind and patient. The boy nodded, his grip tightening on the leash. "His name is Max. We just adopted him. He's scared of everything." Emma smiled, her confidence now as natural as breathing. Apollo was scared too, but now he's not. "Want to come play with us?" After a pause, the boy nodded. With his mom's encouragement, he walked slowly across the grass, Max hesitating, then following. Soon the two dogs were running side by side, Emma's laughter joined by the boys. Sarah's heart swelled as she watched the easy acceptance, the way children instinctively offered what so many adults struggled with: patience, understanding, and a willingness to give someone a chance. The party wore on into the golden hours. There were speeches. Dr. Reynolds shared the journey of the therapy dog program, which had now placed over a dozen former shelter dogs into hospitals, schools, and nursing homes. Michael spoke briefly, his voice thick with emotion, as he thanked the town for believing in Apollo and in their family when it mattered most. Councilwoman Harris announced new funding for animal safety and education. There was even a surprise award, Oakridge Community Heroes, given jointly to Emma and Apollo, complete with a blue ribbon and a plaque that Emma insisted Apollo wear around his neck. As dusk settled, Sarah wandered away from the crowd and sat beneath a tree, notebook in hand. The story of the past year pressed on her heart. Every fear, every fight, every moment of unexpected grace. She began to write a letter to the Oakridge Gazette, one she hoped would reach not just their small town, but anyone who might need to hear it. "To my friends, neighbors, and everyone who calls Oakridge home. We moved here looking for a fresh start, but what we found was more than we ever hoped for. We found kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to change." Apollo's story began with fear and misunderstanding. For a long time, people judged him by how he looked, by what they'd heard about his breed, by mistakes in his past that weren't even his. But when it mattered most, Apollo showed us what really counts: bravery, loyalty, and the ability to forgive. If I have learned anything, it's that true danger rarely comes from where we expect. It's not in a breed, a background, or a mistake. It's in closing our hearts, in letting fear rule our decisions. We have the power to break that cycle, When we open our doors and our minds, we not only save others, we save ourselves. So I ask you, Oakridge, and anyone reading this, don't judge by appearances. Don't close the door on someone or some dog because of their past. Offer a second chance. You might discover a hero in your midst. I know we did. With gratitude, Sarah Mitchell Sarah signed her name, tucking the letter into an envelope to deliver to the paper in the morning. She looked up to see Emma and Apollo approaching, the sun setting behind them, painting the world in gold. Emma flopped onto the blanket beside her mother, Apollo's head finding its usual spot in Emma's lap. "Mom," Emma said, her voice thoughtful, "do you think people in other towns will hear about Apollo and give their dogs a second chance?" Sarah smiled, brushing a leaf from her daughter's hair. "I hope so, sweetheart. I think every town, every family, deserves the kind of hope we found." As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, families gathered for one last song, voices mingling beneath the trees, neighbors who'd once shouted across fences now shared stories and laughter. Children, their faces sticky with melted ice cream, chased each other through the grass with dogs bounding joyfully behind. Apollo, tired but happy, lay surrounded by the people who had become his pack. Not just a family, but a community remade by forgiveness and love. As the music faded and people drifted home, Sarah knew this wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one, for her family, for Oakridge, and maybe for anyone willing to believe in the power of second chances. And so the final lesson lingered in the summer night. The ones most in need of rescue often become our greatest protectors. If you believe in second chances, share Apollo's story. Adopt, don't judge. You might just save a hero.